Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Timelkov.
Dear audience, welcome back on the 115 episodes of The Leaders Who Care. And I'm really excited and thrilled to welcome a great leader and a guest who has done exceptionally well in his life and career. But above all, he really cares about making a difference and loves people from the bottom of his heart, because that's probably one of the single biggest force we could deploy in to make a positive difference and to really care for each other. I am privileged to welcome today Steve Cadigan. Steve, you are not, I wouldn't say a legend, because you're still a living one and really making a great impact. So you're really making such an impact, positive impact to the world through everything you do. But as being the first chief HR officer of LinkedIn and being a strategic advisor at so many companies, from EI to Cisco's to so many other consultancies, what really, what inspired you? How did you really decided to serve people and be in human resources? First of all, welcome and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Marian. Thank you for having me. Thank you for the work that you do. It's sad that we have to have a show called The Leaders Who Care, implying that there are a lot of leaders that don't care, but that's another story for another time. So, when I think about my journey, I think we're all formed by our childhoods. My father and his father and his father and his father were all in the ministry of serving people and serving others. And the first 5 years of my life were spent in South Africa, where my father was on a rotation that turned into be something we thought we could live there forever. And he would preach to a white congregation in the morning, and then he would go to the Zulu townships in the afternoon and offer services to anyone who was interested. So that was a very powerful experience for me growing up in multicultural environments, seeing lots of difference. And then when we were asked to, we weren't asked, we were told that we were kicked out of the country when I was 7. Growing up in a world where I was just curious. And I think that, why are things the way they are? And I think that's a gift of my parents, sort of always, pushing me to think differently, pushing me to ask questions. And that grew me to, love sports. So I'm going to circle the story into sort of, I have great joy as a sports fan, as an athlete. But in particular, I love observing how people handle competitive situations. How does someone react in victory? How does someone react when they're behind? How does someone react to a coach that's very loud? How does someone react when they were the star and then they're no longer the star? How does someone react when they're injured and they're not able to give their best, but their team needs them to be their best? And I found soon after I graduated school that there's actually a profession where you can apply that interest that I had in sports in a corporate organizational setting, and that's the domain of human resources. So once I found that at a pretty early age, probably a year into my career journey, I thought, this is what I want to do the rest of my life.
No, thank you for sharing that story indeed. And I believe that anyone that wants to be, this is a call for all the up and coming leaders in human resources, probably the first thing they need to do is fall in love with people and really understand and really want to serve and their behavior and see how we can get the best out of it. So it's really great to hear. But also we are finding a lot of challenges nowadays with how to attract talents, how to retain talent. It's one of the biggest challenges companies have faced, and we see it as somebody that obviously speak from more than 15 years of experience and completing so many projects in more than 50 countries. I see that day in and day out. And the question here is, of course, do you separate the two, the talent attraction versus the retention? Do you see really, or are you looking at them as one force that you need to work in synergies to be able to attract and retain exceptionally gifted talent?
Well, listen, I think first I have to say that I don't think anyone would ever say that they don't want to attract and keep the best possible talent. I think the challenge for leaders today is that talent, particularly exceptional talent, has more choice, has more visibility, and the market is far more transparent than it's ever been. We're seeing greater turnover at all levels in organizations around the world, not just people leaving, people pivoting to a different career path than at any time in history. We're also seeing more people retire early. We're seeing the population, particularly in the United States, where I spend a lot of time, is aging. So the supply of people who want to work is shrinking, and the supply of choice is growing. And so, and new industries are being born at a rate that we've never seen before. And so I have changed my perspective in the last 5 years from talent retention to relationship retention. People are going to leave. If I ask any leader today, what's your biggest problem? My best people are leaving. I said, okay, let me ask you another question. We're not going to go into why that's happening. We can, but there's a bigger question. The bigger question is this: do you think in the future people will stay longer? Do you think 5 years from now, 10 years from now, people will stay longer? And 99% of the leaders I ask that question to say, no, I don't. I said, okay, so you don't believe in the future people will stay longer. And it's not about your culture. It's not about your bad leadership style. It's not about you're a bad company. It's that they have more choice and more opportunities and more gifts to open and maybe more chances to explore, new projects and new assignments and new cultures and new leadership styles. And so in, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, I couldn't see what was happening in other companies. I couldn't see how they pay, what their culture was, who the leaders were, what their character was. I can see all that today and more. And so I think that dynamic is one where the reality is more people are leaving today than ever before in every country and every industry around the world. So I think the narrative needs to change. It needs to be bigger than keeping your people. It needs to be, let's keep our relationship with people even when they leave, and hopefully they will come back. And if they don't, maybe there'll be an angel in the future. So if you're a great culture that the best people want to join, that's how you win the war for recruiting. It's not with recruiting budget. It's not with more recruiters. It's not with fancy buildings and benefits. Build a culture where people can learn more than anywhere else and make a difference and make an impact. And those great people will find you. And that's what I was able to do at LinkedIn. It's probably a lesson of my life, having to fight against Google, Apple, Facebook, all these beautiful brands. Almost everyone I hired the first 3 years at LinkedIn took a pay cut to join us. Wow. That's how powerful our culture was. And so anyway, this is a very, very important moment, I think, in the world of work, where we are stuck believing that for my company to be successful, my employees have to stay a long time. That's just not true. And let me give you a couple of examples for the audience. Let's look at Silicon Valley. Arguably the most innovative, creative, the geography with the highest market cap collectively of companies in the world, also has the highest turnover and the shortest tenure of any geography in the world. So you can't say that Facebook's great or Google's great or Airbnb or all these other technology. You can't say they're great because people are staying 10, 20, 30 years. You can't, because the companies haven't been around 30 years yet. And they have some of the largest market cap, Apple included, in the world. So I think we need to, at this moment, recognize that model which comes from a good place. The longer you stay, the more I trust you, the more you trust me, the more I can get reliable results, may not necessarily need to be true in a world that's changing very, very quickly. And so that's why I say, if you're trying to retain your people, you're playing defense. If you're trying to build relationships with your alumni and recognize the world of talent as an ecosystem, that's playing offense.
That is fantastic example. So talking about how you attracted people to receive a pay cut. I mean, tell me more about this, because a lot of companies really always, in the world of talent attraction or even executive search, they always look at the number, how much we can offer, and they use that as big leverage. Of course, it is a leverage, but let's maybe explain or articulate a little bit about the lesson of how you could attract talent and even pay less.
Well, I think compensation today, if you're limited in terms of your budget, you actually have to reframe what is compensation. For us, compensation was at LinkedIn was solving a massive problem that's worth solving. The problem was helping people find their dream jobs. Do you want to go to a company that's, I don't know, helping teach children how not to do their homework and building their short attention span and proliferating fake news? Okay, you can go to that company. Or do you want to go to that company and get paid twice, but be engineer number 7,000 and not really have any control over what you're working on? Or do you want to come here and have your fingerprints on building this company and the culture? And also compensation is learning. One of the ways that we were able to do this was saying, we promise you, we didn't meet this goal promise every time, but we sure tried. We promise this will be the most interesting part of your career journey compared to anywhere you could choose. We will grow you, invest in you, challenge you, give you new experiences and opportunities that no one else will give you. Is that interesting to you? Is the problem that we're solving, does that matter to you? And then we also have, in addition to cash, which was less for most people, we have stock options. And if we realize our goal, which we think and hope and believe we will, that's going to offset any potential salary loss that you have. I have to say, the good news is we did. We followed through on that aspiration. And it's the exception. Most startups fail, right? And we succeeded in grand fashion. In fact, it's still in the last 20 years, the most successful technology IPO based on share price movement and market cap growth from founding to exit.
Wow. So that is really what a journey. And when you joined LinkedIn, how big were they? And when you exited, what was the size of the company?
Yeah. So my journey there was 4 years that felt like 20. It was when I joined, we were 400 employees, largely in 2 countries, the US and the UK. When I left, we were 4,000 employees in 17 countries, and we went from about 3 or 4 offices to 26 offices. And the number from 400 to 4,000 is pretty amazing, but that's not the complexity story. The complexity is, 15 new countries. That is insane in under 4 years and doubling the population of the company every year. So and also we didn't know how big we were going to be. So every year, my team, the recruiting team, we would go in and the business units would say, okay, maybe we're going to hire 100, 200. And at the end of the year, we would have hired 500. And so when you go in the beginning of the year with a low plan and you finish with a high plan, that's just absolute insanity in the middle. Okay. No planning. I didn't have the right resources. We're always behind. Everyone was angry at me because I don't have all the resources. And we were terrified because our biggest problem at LinkedIn was recruiting. And guess what our biggest business was? Recruiting. And if the market understood that we were struggling with recruiting, that would be a problem. So we had to fix it. And it forced us to be really, really, really creative. And that's a lot of what I get paid to help companies with right now, is that we weren't great at recruiting because we're a bunch of recruiting geniuses. We were great at recruiting because we were going to die unless we figured it out. And we had to, because it was our business model, right? I think I was the only company in 2009, 10, 11, when we were growing like crazy, that could not use headhunters, executive recruiters. we had to prove that the LinkedIn recruiting system, tool, model, process was optimal, right? And so I got to tell you, in all honesty here, I wasn't sure that our system worked for a while. And in retrospect, years later, I stand back and say, well, it was really hard because we never really had the plans to do what we ultimately did every year. And I had a leadership team that said, we don't want to be a big company. Let's not hire a lot of people in the beginning of the year. And then halfway through, well, if we want to be successful, we need to hire more people. And so this happened again. We never learned. And so that was incredibly stressful. And that's why I didn't stay, longer. I was really, really tired. And also, to be fair, I had the great privilege of having earned a financial independence after the 4 years that I worked there. So I said, okay, I need to take a breath,
Well, that is what an example and story. Now, just thinking of today's context, and there are a lot of companies that I would really love to do what LinkedIn did, and maybe in different areas or different aspects. So there's one element that is focused on the scale up aspect.
That's right.
Having learned what you've learned, what would be your advice to organizations that are scaling up and maybe experiencing maybe experiencing such a hiring situations?
Well, it's interesting you would ask that. I was just hired at the beginning of this year by the city of Lisbon, Portugal, to help them build their first national scale-up program, an incubator. And it's really for startups that want to experience hypergrowth. So I built a whole, several week course on this topic because it's not a simple answer, but I'll offer you some insights. If you're wanting to prepare yourself for hypergrowth, you better be really clear about this one question, which is, why does anyone want to work for you? Why? And you better be sure that it doesn't include what everyone other company says. We're nice, we pay well, we're fair, we have good leaders, we have a good culture, we're going to make a lot of money. Because everyone says that. So you better be clear beyond that why someone should work for you, and also who's probably not a good fit for you. So we had to accept early on that not everyone's going to want to work here, and that's okay, but who is the right profile for us? What is their background? What are their experiences that are going to lend us to have a higher confidence? They're going to make an impact and they're going to really enjoy our culture. So here's one of the biggest mistakes that we made at LinkedIn. It was one that led to a few big problems. When we started to see that we were really going to start to make this, it was going to probably happen, and we're going to be $1 billion business one day, we started to hire people who'd run $1 billion businesses, because none of us had on the leadership team. Let's go, when you don't have the experience, let's go hire the experience. Well, we made a big mistake. We hired people who hadn't built $1 billion business. We hired people who had run $1 billion business. And there is a massive difference when you're trying to grow big between someone who's managed at scale and someone who is built to scale. And so here's what would happen. These people who manage $1 billion businesses would come in and say, hey, I need 3 secretaries. And we say, we don't have secretaries here. And if we do, they support 5 people. So you're not going to get 3 secretaries just for you. You understand? So they're used to big systems and running the trains, not putting the tracks down. So if you're looking to hyperscale, you better surround yourself with builders and people who understand how to bring, frameworks and process and order from chaos, because that is hypergrowth. It is absolutely chaos. Then I think you really need to build a great culture where the best people want to join. And that includes specifically really focusing on building trust. Now, as a leadership team, I don't think we ever said, what is our trust strategy? But everything we did was towards building trust and faith and belief in us, because when things are changing as human beings, when we don't know what's going on or understand it, we assume the worst. But if you're always in front of your employees, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, what concerns do you have? What disagreements do you have? Let's talk about those. And maybe we're wrong and we'll listen to you, but we need to have those conversations. So we tried to build as collaborative and open a culture. And so what does that look like? Well, it looks like we would never send an organization communication in an email. it would always be an in-person town hall meeting. And some people think, well, how can that be? Well, that's how we did it. Because what happens when you send your team and you're growing really fast, I need to get this message out to the team. And you write this big, huge email and everyone gets it. And they say, it's really big. I'll read it later. And then they never read it because later never comes because they're so busy. So we would make sure that our communications, which happened every week, were interesting. They were fun. They're funny. They were built with humor. And they were also really informative. So everyone wanted to hear what was going on. But there's so many other lessons there. I mean, hypergrowth is hard. I don't want to, for anyone who's listening, who's on the hypergrowth journey, I'm going to tell you, there were moments of joy, but a lot of it was really, really hard, really hard. And I think your capacity to thrive in that environment comes down to how well you talk about hard things and how well you can work through disagreements. So this is one of the, I think, the big misunderstandings about successful businesses. People on the outside look at LinkedIn and go, oh, it must have been really fun. I go, no, it wasn't always fun. I got to tell you that. We fought, we disagreed, but we talked about the hard things. And we worked through difficult things related to our strategy, related to our compensation philosophy, related to our org design, how many levels we should have. It wasn't always happy. It was really, really intense sometimes, but we had to disagree. And if you build a culture where everyone has to be nice, I think you're going to wind up in a nice, mediocre situation. If you work at a place where people can really, share what's on their mind and be really passionate about it and disagree, and you welcome it, I think you're going to invite a lot more creativity and innovation.
Well, this is really great insight here when I'm listening. And you talk about the trust, which is always about paying attention, spending time with them in person. And how was that possible to do the town hall meetings? Were they, like people question now with the remote working,
Yeah.
how could they replicate something like this?
Yeah.
It would be virtual.
Right. We had to do, an in-person room. This is before hybrid was a thing, before it was even a car. We would say, here's the conference room. We could only fit 300 people and we had 1,000 people at one point. So dial in. We're not going to make it mandatory. And if you are in a geography that is time constrained, that you cannot attend, that what happened, we didn't ask this to happen. We didn't mandate it. We didn't say this is the rule. But what would happen, for example, in Sydney and in India, the teams the next morning would get up and they would watch the all hands together as a team and talk about it. The office manager or the office leader or the country leader would say, hey, let's listen to this. And sometimes if some of us like me or the CFO or the CEO were awake, we would join in and say, do you have any other questions that weren't asked in the session that we could ask? So we were not apologetic, to people in different time zones. We are a West Coast American company. This is when we're going to be meeting. And so, we will try to do the best to include you. But, it worked for us because it was a forum where people would most of the time ask really tough questions, which meant we felt that they trusted us. You understand?
Awesome. And really, someone said to me that one of the key things to foster that kind of culture is your first reaction when there's a problem. And if you react lash out aggressively and you during the problem or the tough question, you immediately shut this down, and that could be really can stay for years and very difficult to repair, because what it means, you don't want to hear the tough questions, or you don't want to hear, you really want people to, which it also slows down your innovation, your experiment. Whereas what you're saying, you fostered exactly that, people to be open and be really bullish about the questions and the tough questions and the problems that you faced. And that is a great takeaway. But how did leaders took this? When you were a CEO, when you guys were having those difficult questions, you had no answer. At that time, was it Reid Hoffman and Jeff Weiner were the kind of...
Yes. Yeah. I sat next to Jeff, and on the other side of Jeff was Reid for the entirety of my experience there. Incredible people, incredibly different people. Jeff was the third CEO, and Reed was the founder and the first CEO. And Reed, because the CEO before Jeff, that relationship hadn't worked out as well as Reed would have liked, because there was organization confusion. Should I go to Reed? Should I go to Jeff? So Reed, when he hired Jeff, was really hands off. But here's one of the things that I will tell you on this topic of hard conversations. Any salesperson will tell you the most loyal customers you have are the ones where you had a problem and you fixed it. More loyal than the customers where you never had a problem, because that moment served as an opportunity for them to see your values and your ethics and your morals. What are you going to do when things are down? This is why I love the pandemic, because it was the greatest leadership test in history.
Absolutely.
You're going to see how people handle it. And thankfully, our leaders under Jeff and Reed's guidance recognized whenever something goes wrong, that's an opportunity for us to show our mettle as leaders. Are we going to scream and yell and blame and point fingers and fire people? Or are we going to say, okay, I'm going to take responsibility. Let's find out how we can fix it so it doesn't happen again. And I'm telling you, when you're building a company as fast as we were, one of the problems we had in the early days was every Monday when I joined, the LinkedIn site would sputter, and sometimes it would go down for a second or two. And that is bad. When your users have a bad experience, they won't come back. And the problem was we didn't know why it was happening because the code was spaghetti code. And anyone who's a coder on this, for years, we've been doing workarounds around workarounds. And so after a certain point, we had to basically rebuild the entire site from scratch, which is for those who are programmers understand this, it is very unsexy work to refactor code. So we had to do that. But did our leadership team blame the people for building a spaghetti code? No. They just said, for us to realize our destiny, we're going to have to do some hard stuff. And this is about doing the right thing. And they would say, Jeff would say, I should have taken this on sooner, or maybe we should have taken a different approach and that just happened again and again and again. And it builds the goodwill. Were all our leaders great at this? No. We definitely made some mistakes. And we learned along the way. But for example, one of the most challenging moments for us as a company came when it was discovered that some hackers had stolen about 4 million passwords from our users, okay? Not the user ID, the password. And most members don't have a credit card on file with us. So it wasn't like anyone was going to lose any money, but anyone who knows what a hacker wants, they want the password, because then they find you and then they go to your bank and they use the password you use at LinkedIn in your bank. And so, and we found out where the hackers got in. It was one of our IT system staff at home where they weren't paying attention with the VPN and they left it on and someone came in. So did we fire the person? Nope, we didn't. We explained what happened. We said, we got to do a better job in the future. And we apologized to all our customers. We were very transparent and said this was our mistake. And then that led to sort of two-factor authentication. And we also found out, this is crazy. And I can't remember if the numbers I'm going to share right now are literally true, but we learned a really interesting lesson. Of the 4 million or so passwords that were compromised, do you know what about 20% of the passwords were the same password? Do you know what it was?
What?
Password. People said, what's the password? I'm going to say password. And then there was another 20% that was 11111111. And another 20% was 22222 or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so we said, no, you can't. We're going to have to make you come up. That's why you see now when you open up a new credit card or you sign up for something new, you have to have a capital letter, a lowercase letter, a number, and an asterisk or an exclamation mark, something like that. But those moments are really, this is where I don't think leaders should be perfect all the time. We're humans. We are going to screw up, right? The question is, how do you recover? And if you do that well and quickly, you will be more admired. And your staff will be more loyal to you than if you're always perfect. We've all worked for those leaders who, when something went wrong, we got blamed, even though it was their fault, right? Like, you don't want to work for that leader. You want to work for leaders when you screw up, or if you do, the leader says, it was my fault, not your fault. even though they know it's not their fault, right? Because they just want to move away from like finding blame and move towards solution and making things better.
Well, this is just awesome, and you guys were at that time obviously the cutting edge and groundbreaking in many ways. Even though that should be, as you say, the natural form. Like, why do we have even like leaders who care? I guess everybody should care, but the reality is, I think, in your point of view of scripture, normally human beings are flawed. Like we are designed to make mistakes and really make bad choices. And I think this is where really is important to how do you recover, how do you build mentorships, methodical mentorship of people. And even to today's date, with the COVID crisis, we are seeing massive change and massive really opportunity with remote work, because what we've been told for many years during the COVID was exposed. It was really not true that people cannot do a great job when they work remotely. Of course, there's certain caveats to that, but typically now being at the forefront, some of the groundbreaking really work around talent and culture. How do you think traditional leaders, and there's still I think there's still so many out there, I think it's like have or adapting to the current reality or the new age we're living?
I think that's a very big demographic right now. Leaders who are struggling, they're uncomfortable. The skills and the tools that they use to get them to the executive office don't have the same outcomes or results or effect that they used to have. And command and control doesn't seem to be as well received or acceptable anymore. And I feel for those people, because that's the skill they built and learned that got them to the CXO role, right? And so now what we're finding is their employees have more choices and more places they can go see what's available, what's not available, more ways that they can work and more things that they want. And the supply of qualified talent is shrinking, and it's going to continue to shrink, and there's a lot of reasons for that. During the pandemic, for example, for 2 years at least, global immigration of knowledge workers basically stopped. And in the United States, that means between 1.2 and 1.8 million workers who were entering the US every year stopped. So that's 2-3 million knowledge workers just not there. There's countries like Germany, Australia, Spain that are saying, if we don't have more external immigrant knowledge workers in our economy, to the tune of 2, 3, 4, 500,000 every year for the next 5 years, our country is going to face an economic crisis. So that's the world of talent. Talent has the leverage now, and command and control is not the stick that's going to get you through that. So, Marion, my belief is the pain and the stress of the fact that these old world model leaders are going to face, because they can't hire people, is going to force them to have to adopt a different approach, or it's going to force them to say, I think I'm going to go early retire over there in Portugal, and get out of the game. Because I deal with this all the time, and I know this is existing, because here's what's happened, Marion, and for the listeners, I have been hired by the middle management of several Fortune 100 companies to help them convince the senior management, the old world model, thinkers, on why they should let their people work from home more and be more flexible. I've been hired by middle management to convince the old model thinkers in these companies to help them have a business case and to help influence changing the thinking. And so I know it's out there to a significant degree. And I don't have an easy antidote, because everyone, every leader brings something different to the table. But I will say this in the defense of some of the leaders in these companies that are saying, everyone get back to the office. I'll say this, which is, as much as I know a lot of knowledge workers would prefer to have more freedom and flexibility of where and when they work, most senior executives are not convinced that the company can be as successful if everyone is in a different place as they were when everyone was together. And they're jobs are on the line if the company doesn't succeed. So they're living with a model where when we were in person, we were successful. When we're not in person, I don't know that we're going to be successful. We might be, but I don't know that I have the capacity to assume that risk right now. So when I'm talking to these middle management teams about how to influence the senior executives, I said, let's start by understanding, why do they think the way that they do? Because to be able to influence somebody, I think you need to have a great amount of empathy and compassion. Understand why are they taking that position? Why do they think that the way that they do? So, but it's tough. You know, I have very provocative thoughts, as you probably already can sense, on the future of work. And sometimes I can see that look in the eyes, like these people do not want to hear this. When I say to people, do you think people in your company are going to stay longer in the future? And they go, no. They're like unhappy that they have to agree that no. I said, okay, well then let's think about the fact that every benefit in your company is rewarding people to stay longer, but you just told me they probably won't. So maybe we need to re-engineer how we think about our relationship with people and care about them even when they go, you know, and not just to have every one of our rewards, more vacation, more pension, more retirement, all based on how long someone stays. Because we're never going to pay that money, because people are not going to probably stay to the degree that they used to, you know?
This is just so many thoughts are going through right now, because we could really dig in some of those. But really, when it comes down to these topics, and they're so important, and you've seen a lot of those provocative, let's say, cases. Maybe let's start with those most provocative thoughts, like, you know, when you're thinking of what really, if you had no limit to the design, the type of organization and company, how would you design it so that it's attracting and retaining, maybe you talk about relationship management, maybe not only attracting and retaining, but actually maybe growing through people leaving. Maybe that's a good way, because I think it's possible that companies could grow through an entrepreneurial. So maybe a large companies could give a stage. Somebody is exceptionally gifted, they might leave, but why don't we invest in that person? And maybe they will, we still give them a ground and backing and the financing, the security they need, of a large one, and they go and venture out on their own, but we still have a ownership of that, or part of ownership, and we still give them the supplies, and we still kind of manage this. I don't know. Companies are not very easy about those topics, because they're afraid, they have some fear. But I'm just thinking, what would be your thought and advice if really you've got a large organization, and you've got like say a green light to do anything, right? To kind of and this is Fortune 100 organization.
Sure.
What would you do? No limits, literally.
Great. Okay, Marion, I've given this a lot of thought, and I've actually been asked this question by a number of my very big, very interesting clients. And so where I like to start with is I can't prescribe the right way for every organization, but I do know what the pillars and the foundational elements are that are going to need to be in place in somehow, you know, because I don't know a company's culture as well as they do. I don't know their leadership style or their legacy or all the issues. But here's a great example that I like to use, and that is taking an industry that's been around for 100 years, the automobile industry. Okay, let's take a look at the automobile industry, because we've got Ford, Honda, Toyota, General Motors, four of the biggest players with the greatest amount of market share, the greatest amount of profits from selling cars, all of those companies, for over 100 years.
In US.
Around the world. Okay. I don't have China data, but there's some really interesting companies in China. But if we take a look at those companies, they're not the most valuable automobile manufacturer in the world. Not even close. There's one company out there today that's worth more than the value, the market cap of all those companies combined. Do you know who that company is?
Sure. Tesla.
It's Tesla. Now this is fundamentally should cause these other automobile manufacturers to be shaking in their boots. Tesla's not even 25 years old. Their CEO is a part-time CEO. He has two other jobs. I think his name's Tony Stark. I forget. He's a crazy man. their tenure is about 2 years. Most of the people they hired are not from the automobile industry traditionally, okay? And yet all the investors believe that Tesla is worth more. Their future is brighter than Ford, Honda, Toyota, and General Motors combined. And that is, wow. So what they're saying is, if you've been around 100 years, we don't believe that you know or are capable of or have the interest or the willpower to innovate as fast as people who just got here, who are not encumbered by all these paradigms and models of how we should build value. And so I like to use that as a model because it's in one way, it's the business case for diversity. New people with new ideas from different industries can conspire and collaborate to solve problems in very unique ways and innovate. And that's what all the investors believe collectively Tesla's capable of, more than the people who've been doing it for 100 years. And so that's why, I use that example also to blow up the model that, maybe in this economy that's changing quickly, where new skills are needed and new challenges come really quickly. And the automobile industry has gone from gasoline to hybrid to, electric power really fast, like really fast. We just passed a law in California in 2035. You cannot sell a new automobile that is not fully electric. That's wow. I was just in Spain last week. If you have an electric car, you can park anywhere for free in the city. If you don't have an electric car, you cannot go downtown Madrid during rush hour times, or you will be fined. And so that, cities are taking measures. So I think that is probably, for me, when I look at the architecture of work, it is recognizing that and building a model that thrives when new people are coming in. So what does that mean? That means we need to think differently about jobs. Any job you have in your company that takes someone a year to learn is probably going to cause you great pain, because after 14, 15 months, that person's going to go and you just spent a year getting them up to speed. So if you get a job that takes someone a year, you need to re-engineer it so it takes them a month or two. You're going to need to build teams a lot faster. You're going to have flatter organizations that not have a lot of level, because you're going to need to communicate quickly. And you're going to need to build an ecosystem. And you're going to have to care more than just your employees. You need to care about your contractors, your gig workers, your temporary staff, all who are adding value. And I like the way you framed it, Marian. So you listened to what I said and you said, it's not about attraction and retention. It's about attraction and building value. That's what we're in the business for. Build value, create a better world. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the formula has to include people staying a long time. I'm not happy about it. I want my people to stay a long time. I used to get my bonus check based on my turnover being really low, but it's just unrealistic today, right? And so those are some of the things. Having an alumni strategy as a company. Most companies were built that I worked for, when you leave, they never talk to you again. It's like a divorce. Like, you don't think I'm sexy anymore? Well, I don't think you're sexy. So go. Right? You can't do that now, because you have every company today, everyone has more former employees than ever before. So if you're not nurturing and curating that community, that's a big missed opportunity. But we're not used to doing that. The airline industry during COVID basically laid off, furloughed, offered early retirement to many of their pilots. Okay. When the pandemic ended and all these air travel starting to go crazy, and this summer is going to arguably be the biggest amount of air travel we've ever seen in history, the airline's like, we can't hire enough pilots. So then they said, well, let's call the pilots that quit. And then someone said, well, we didn't keep their emails because we deleted them from the system. You don't even know how to get the pilots that used to work for you for 20, 30 years because you didn't care? Well, shame on you, right? So this is where that's what I call a self-inflicted wound, because you're thinking about only caring about the people when they work for you, not after they leave. And that, as our future architecture work, is a huge one that costs you nothing. It costs you nothing to send. Like, I worked at LinkedIn, as you know. They're the only company of the 6 major companies I work for that even reaches out to me And it's not every week. It's about once a month. Hey, there's a lunch here. There's a webinar. Reed's going to give a talk to the alumni. Would you coach somebody? Steve, we've got a new product. Would you check it out and give us your feedback? That makes me feel so much a part of that community. I want to do everything I can to help LinkedIn still, right?
What a great advice, honestly. And if you think about those large companies, whether it's automobile or any other industry, any company that have had, even in their lifespan, probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions of employees, I mean, that's millions of families directly impacted. And
Right.
it's very important, right? How do you, what do they think of you? How do you take care of them while they're not, so that while you're no longer employed or they're no longer with you? And honestly, I think this is just a big one here that you just revealed today. I think if there's one thing they could do is actually not only to think about their current employees, but to think about really all the relationships they've built over the years. What do they do? How can they reactivate? How could they take better care of that? And that's why business is so powerful. We could do so much. Start giving. I mean, that's the first. Start giving something of value, because you're a profitable business. Then you can use the empowered your employees to start giving more. When you grow, you feel alive, but when you start giving, you feel 10 times more alive. Why don't you start using your profits to start giving around to causes that your employees care about?
Right. And if you extend that out, Marian, it's, and I'm working on a new book right now, and this is sort of the genesis of where I want to go in it, which is, I believe traditionally we have overvalued experience and undervalued the energy of putting someone in a new situation. So think about you were telling me your career arc before we went live on the air. It wasn't a straight line, was it? It was this. And in the way you talked about, and then I did this, and then I did this, and the energy that you had being put in a new situation was powerful.
Yes.
But we have designed work to disable that from happening. Stay in the same job, don't move around, we've architected work in a very, with good intentions, but the unintended consequence of suffocating people's opportunities. If you ask any executive, what was that one moment in your career when things changed? They will tell you it was when I had a boss who put me in a situation that I don't think I was ready for. It was a little bit scary, and I was a little underprepared, and I loved it. And it was scary, terrifying, but enormously rewarding. And yet we don't build for that to happen. Actually, we design for it not to happen, which I think is another one of those moments of what's the architecture of the future of work. It is tapping into energy by putting more people than we're used to in situations that they're not fully prepared for, to unlock the joy of solving something new, a new problem. I love human resources. Why? Because every day there's some new crazy problem that's landing on my desk, which I love. The fact that every day is different, right?
What a great summary here, that you just all those key things that only if you take away one, and I mean, it will make a massive impact, just to take better relationship and better care of all your former employees, or really create even communities for large organizations. That would be just tremendous. Or just putting people into new situations. And as you were speaking, I was just reflecting a little bit about the things that I've done, and some of the greatest connections and partnerships that I've ever had evolved to exactly that. Just helping, putting people, and it also made me think of what you just said about thinking about the role and the job, how you've done, how can you train people faster? How can you get them to really learn something much faster? And this is where probably a lot of the systems and processes could come in, of capturing something that, I mean, often when it's a industry that is based on relationships, maybe that's a skill, how to build relationships and inspire trust faster. Maybe that's something which can be thought, and really,
I'm really hopeful about the future, Marian, because I think that all this AI that we're hearing about, all this increase in automation and robotics, is going to force us, in order for us to add value and make a difference, it means we're going to have to be more human than we've ever been. And we'll let all the rote tasks, all the repetitive stuff get handled by other people. And this is really a moment, because what AI is starting to show, it's not the blue collar worker, it's not the frontline, staff that is going to have their jobs changed a lot by AI. It's going to be the white collar worker, the knowledge worker and that has not happened at this scale before. All the machines changed a lot of blue collar work. AI is going to change white collar work at a scale we've never seen before. And this is sort of, I was in Spain with some of my brain trusts last week in Madrid, and we were really talking a lot about this. The founder, the creator of OpenAI, said the biggest surprise he has is how the white collar, domain is going to be radically changed at a scale that we've never seen before. But again, to tether this away from fear and more into joy, I believe that our human traits and skills are what we call soft skills, which I call power skills: communication, empathy, understanding, care, dare I say, love. These emotions that we have that are fundamentally human are going to differentiate our capacity to be successful more than ever before as we think about the future of work. And that's a good thing, I think.
Going back to our roots, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a little bit difficult because technology, in a way, made us, because they fight for our attention, made us probably less focused on those soft skills and less focused on those emotions, because we all been often or trying to be occupied by all sorts of distractions and great content. But now is the time to start really going back to nature, to to the human being nature of connecting with others, being around the fire, being around the groups, and talking about those stories and connecting with one another. It's interesting. I've also found that a lot of leaders do not have the capacity to connect well with people. They're just because they are really busy and they're on a short span, and just that deeper connection is difficult for them. And I think research was shown that a lot of them even may be narcissists, and the definition of narcissism is not because of the big blaming them. It's just because they're how they were brought up.
Right.
If they were brought up in a certain way, and obviously the behavior was such that only mattered when you get some A grade, or you paid attention, and or you don't have really much time to, as you were growing up, to connect with people and understand emotions. It's tough. And they may often in jobs or businesses that they don't have a lot of time as well, so they speak with people, but they for 30 minutes. It's not like a deeper connection. 30 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 1 hour there, and they sometimes struggle. So I think this is a really good lesson also for parents as well. Maybe teach if you give advice to parents, what would be your advice to focus on now with their children before it's in the context of future of work? What should we focus on helping our children most with in order to thrive in the future?
I still I think back to my own journey, and I feel really fortunate. My parents didn't build a box that I had to fill out. For example, you have to be a this, so study this to be a that. The truth is, I believe the most powerful skills in the future are the human skills that you have, not the technical skills. You can learn technical skills, but I can't teach influence. I can't teach work ethic. I can't teach, communication or, empathy. Those are really important skills. So I would try to build curiosity, game playing. I would try to build a growth mindset, which is really, when your brain hurts, it's because you're growing. And Carol Dweck, who's the godmother of growth mindset, just study that. And hopefully you have your kids in schools where it's not a school where the teacher has all the authority and you get in trouble if you ask a question or you show any sign of personality. And I think that's serving our kids the best, is just to be curious all the time, and also develop the capacity to be able to communicate and talk about hard things. That's probably how I've differentiated myself in my career. And it probably involves having been in therapy for a number of years for a number of different personal challenges that I was facing, I really learned to understand my own thoughts and feelings and be able to express them in ways that a lot of people tell me, whoa, how did you just say that? Like, what did you just say? And so that served me really well because you can help people navigate. So one of the funny experiences I have sometimes with my boys is I'll call them on the phone. They won't answer, but they'll text me back, say, what do you want? And I say, I want you to answer the phone. So we can, that's what I want. And then later, my mother will call me and I'll text her, is everything okay? And she says, pick up the phone, so I'm a victim of it too. But this is what my biggest fear is. You mentioned it earlier, Marion, which is, are we losing the capacity to really exchange and dialogue and work through things together because of our obsession with technology and short form communication that we can always edit, but live unstructured debate is something that doesn't seem to happen as frequently. And I know I'm sounding like an old man with gray hair because I am, but that's one of my big fears of the future. And I try to, really push my kids when we're together. We talk about all kinds of stuff. And I hope that that's going to have a helpful impact on their futures.
Well, you've been a great insights today, and thank you for sharing all of those thoughts today, Steve. Really appreciate what you do, and thank you for being a leader who cares from the bottom of your heart and impacting so many people in a positive way and really making a profound difference. Final question, what is you mentioned something really nice, and we love that to finish in a positive note and talk about really what are your hopes for more hopeful, for more caring future? What do you see if there was no limits to the world, to the future? Mm-hmm. What are the kind of things you wish for?
Well, I think I'm starting to be more hopeful that our relationship with technology is evolving so that technology delivers a more human experience full of joy. Technology to date makes us feel like we're behind, we're not on top of it, we're missing out, and I hope we're moving towards a direction where all that technology is so we realize a greater human experience. That's what it should be for, nothing else. And I think we're waking up and recognizing with the fact that the founders of AI are in front of the Congress in the US last week, like, what have you built? And they're like, we don't even know what we built. We're starting to recognize we're going to need to put some guardrails up and some boundaries. And all the cases of burnout that we've seen during the pandemic, and that's not going to slow down unless we are more intentional around putting, guardrails up that the human brain cannot actually consume everything that we're expected to consume right now. So that's what I'm hopeful that we're starting to see people recognize that, take action, so that we're going to have a future filled with more joy.
Fantastic. I had some comments in the meantime from somebody who's very dear and really, this is Stoyankov, and he's just sharing a question. It's an amazing episode, guys. Steve, who is a leader, a role model that impacted you the most, your own leadership style and development? Just to hear your thoughts on the role models.
There's probably a lot. If you really want to know, you read my book, Workwake. I talk about a woman named Mimi Jagu who never went to university, was one of the greatest teachers of some really important things like hire people that are better than you, and you will become a better leader. And I was very intimidated by that lesson. But probably the leader who has shaped my thinking the most, looking back on my career, it wasn't someone, I've never met this person. I saw them speak once, but I read their book. It's a gentleman named Peter Senge, and he wrote a book and a field guide to it as well, called The Fifth Discipline. And that book was so powerful in making me look at organizations as complex organism of systems. And once you build a system view, you can help improve systems and fix systems. So Peter Senge and Mimi Jagu would be my two.
Fantastic. Well, we'll also love to, I'm also very curious about your book, but also your new book that is coming. So Tell us more about this news. What, just to wrap up on that topic. Why did you write your book? The first one, and what about second? What's
Sure.
really the inspiration there?
Sure. Well, I always have my book handy here, but the book that I wrote came out in 2021. It's called Workquake.
Workquake, yeah.
And it's embracing the aftershocks of COVID-19 to create a better future of working. And I wrote that because I was frustrated, Marion, and you can probably feel it in this conversation. Everything we talked about that's not working, the model of work was built for a slower, more predictable reality of work. And we're not in that period right now. And so we need to be experimenting more. And so that was what motivated me to write that book, to offer hope to both employers and employees who are equally frustrated. Think about that. Both parties, employer and employees, don't know what skills they need for the future. They don't. So, and they're both uncomfortable about, and all we're doing is scaring everyone by saying, oh, in 30 years, half the jobs that people are going to do don't even exist today. Well, that's just scaring people. And so I wanted to create more of a hopeful model and I use a bunch of different examples, practical examples of things that I see that are really inspiring, where people are experimenting more. And my next book that I'm in the process of putting together right now is really around this notion of, I believe we have underappreciated putting people in new situations that they don't have a lot of experience doing and unlocking enormous amounts, disproportionate amounts of energy. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe that is a design that we need to build into work more to help compensate for the fact that the supply of qualified people is going to continue to diminish in the future. So if you have fewer experienced people, and I'm already seeing it right now, Marion, most of my friends who are recruiters say we used to fill jobs with someone who was 95% qualified. It's now about 70% qualified. And that's okay if you've got a plan to bridge that, right? But I will also offer to you someone who's 70% qualified is going to be really excited to do the job a lot more than someone who's 100% qualified because they've done it already. Why do they want to go do something they've already done? And someone who's later in their career, probably they may want that, but someone who's early in their career, like, give me new stuff. That's going to really spark me. So I'm trying to find more examples of that in the world so that I can help, again, make the future seem more achievable and more comfortable.
Love that. What I'll also do, Steve, I will order some copies of your book, and I'd love to send it to anyone who is listening and is interested into the book. Just let us know. We'll send out 10 copies of your book out. Great. So, and also love to offer your book to some of our clients as well. Fantastic. Great. Thank you for bringing this. This is so valuable. And when you just said this earlier about putting people in new situation, this is very much about what we've been doing, with Gen Z. And that's why we believe in young people, because they're so powerful. There's so much energy. They just need methodical mentorship and actually coaching and continuously being challenged and put in new situations. It's just explained a lot of things when you were just talking about that. And so I'm very excited about your new book and love to invite you back when it's really on and zoom into that topic as well.
Super. Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me, Marion.
What a pleasure. Blessings go out to you, your family, all your work and colleagues that you've impacted. And thank you so much for being such an impactful leader, Steve.